Welcome to the Cheating&Love Tales channel. It was a mistake. Nice. I do not have to explain, she said, her voice trembling at the edges. She stood across the living room, near the couch we bought 5 years ago. A slightly faded blue fabric, meant to bring a casual, comfortable vibe into our home. Now it felt like a stage for a tragedy neither of us had the will to rewrite. I remained silent, hands deep in my pockets, knuckles clenched so hard they felt numb. She looked at me, waiting for a reply. None came. She exhaled. Michael, don't do this. Don't just stand there. My eyes flicked to the laptop on the coffee table, still open to that damned folder. Tax documents 2022. What a neat lie. I could hear my own heartbeat, drumming in my ears, slow and heavy, like I was moving through water. Her phone rested next to the laptop, screen black, still harboring the messages I'd read a dozen times. I could almost see his name glowing in the dark. Chris, her old college flame. The man I once heard her call Dad's shadow, because he followed her father around campus, always eager for advice, always there. And now, years later, he was here in spirit, overshadowing everything I thought we built. She fidgeted with the hem of her sweatshirt. I told you. He and I, just talked. It didn't mean anything. I pressed my lips together. In my mind, I saw the photos. Her legs, half bare, posed in front of a hideous orange and brown rug. A cheap motel rug, maybe, or his apartment's living room. My gut twisted. I thought of how those images were taken, the angle, the intimacy. The small details, her toenail polish, the way her knee bent, the faint reflection in a mirror capturing his silhouette. It was an accident that I found them, or fate. The difference didn't matter now. They were real, unedited, right there in front of me. She took a step closer. Look at me. I lifted my gaze. My jaw felt locked, like I had to force it open. There's nothing left to say, I managed. She shook her head. Michael, it was a mistake. I swallowed. Mistake. That word rattled inside my chest. Mistakes are typos or forgetting your keys in the car. Mistakes are not creeping off to a hotel, or wherever they went, while claiming a business conference or meeting with donors for the nonprofit. I could almost taste the bitterness in my mouth, like iron, yet the anguish behind her eyes tugged at something inside me. Even now, after all of this, part of me still loved her. That was the worst betrayal. The betrayal of my own heart that refused to die. A silence fell over us, thick and stifling. She pressed her trembling lips together. Let me explain, she repeated softly. I closed the laptop. You said you don't have to. She flinched at the coldness in my voice. Enough, I said, and turned away. That was the beginning. Quiet, raw, a swirl of half-suppressed rage in my chest. Everything else came later. The letters, the confrontation, the so-called tribunal, and the final door slam. But in that moment, in the hush of our suburban living room, my world stopped. I spent the night in the spare bedroom. Couldn't stand the sight of our marital bed. Couldn't stand the memory of how recently I'd lain there next to her, unsuspecting, while her phone buzzed with texts from him. The house was silent except for the occasional rush of a passing car. Through the thin walls, I heard her open and close drawers, rummaging. Maybe she was packing a bag, or maybe she was just searching for some lost sense of normalcy. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan, my mind replaying the same scene. Her eyes wide with guilt, and me wanting to shout but too numb to form the words. At 3 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out a beer. Usually, I'd drink coffee or maybe a glass of water, but this night demanded something else. The label sweat in my hand. Cold. Unforgiving. I took a long sip, letting the bitterness wash over my tongue. My gaze drifted to the phone on the counter. I had my own secrets, my own messages, and the guilt that I wasn't any saint either. I flipped the phone open, scrolled through my sent folders. Those letters I typed late at night, searching for what? A spark of something new. A fleeting validation. My mind flickered with images of the women I'd written to, faceless, distant acquaintances from some online platform, or a friend of a friend. My fingertips hovered over the screen. The hypocrisy chewed at me like a dull ache. She had crossed a line in the real world. I had flirted with crossing it. Maybe that made me better, or maybe it made me worse, because I pretended to be righteous while indulging in fantasies. I hadn't physically betrayed her, but was that enough to absolve me? I set the phone aside. My breathing felt shaky. I popped the cap off another beer, downed half, and stared at the empty darkness of our living room. The couch looked like a lonely creature, half lit by the street lamp outside. The memory of the day's discovery settled in the corners of my mind. I thought about how easily everything we'd built could collapse. The mortar in the walls of our marriage had cracked, letting the wind blow right through. Part of me wanted to run in there to her, demand an explanation that satisfied me. But I already tried. Nothing she said could erase the photos, the texts, the clandestine tone in each message. My chest felt hollow, like I'd swallowed an iceberg. I wanted to scream, but all I managed was to keep drinking, keep existing in that suffocating hush. Eventually, I dozed off in the armchair, the beer bottle balanced on my thigh, the last coherent thought swirling. She's not the only one who betrayed someone tonight. Morning came in pale gray light. I jerked awake to a stiff neck and a dull pounding in my skull. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. Work email, some spam, and an unread message from a number I didn't recognize. Frowning, I opened it. It was just a photo. The same shot from her folder, only the angle slightly different. A woman's legs, parted, the same ugly rug in the background, maybe in some motel or Chris's place. My stomach lurched. I recognized the lines of her ankles, even the mole on her right foot. The text below it, "Still want more." I swallowed, throat dry. This wasn't from her. Chris then. Or maybe it was an elaborate piece of twisted torment from someone else. My heart hammered. I stared at it, fury building from some deep reservoir. The phone buzzed again, a second message. "You know where to find me." Then silence. My hand shook as I locked the screen. Did he think this was some game? Some competition for her affections? The idea that he'd rub my nose in it like that. The anger coursed through me, hot and cold all at once. Still, I forced myself to remain quiet. She was in the next room, maybe rummaging through the kitchen. I could hear the faint clink of dishes. Focus. Breathe. I got up, ignoring the dull ache in my head, and stepped into the hallway. She stood by the sink, staring out the window at the dull suburban street. Her hair was tangled, and she wore the same sweatshirt, the same exhaustion in her posture. When she noticed me, she flinched, then spoke softly. "Do you want coffee?" "Sarah," I said, voice hoarse. "Go pack." She put down the cup she was holding. "Pack for what?" "You're leaving. Or I am. Doesn't matter. This house can't hold both of us right now." She blinked, tears threatening. "Please, let's talk." I just stared at her. "Get your things." My voice came out hollow, mechanical. Inside me was a silent explosion, everything raging. But outwardly, I was ice. She didn't argue. Her eyes dropped. She nodded, pressed her lips together, and disappeared down the hall. I felt a strange pang. There was no victory in sending her away. No satisfaction. Only emptiness and a faint voice in my head that said, "You still love her, even after this." But I shoved that aside. Pride demanded some immediate boundary. Pride demanded she not linger in my sight. The day crawled on. She left with a small suitcase, no theatrics, no final appeal. I watched her drive off in her sedan, her shoulders bowed in a way I'd never seen before. The space she left behind echoed in every corner. My chest felt simultaneously weighed down and empty, a contradictory tension that refused to resolve. I tried to work, typing up lines for a new ad campaign. But the words blurred on the screen. My entire body was on autopilot, cold and distant. Hours passed in a fog, my half-finished sentences mocking me. At around 3 in the afternoon, I gave up. I needed answers, or maybe I needed a confrontation. I pulled out my phone, stared at the unknown number. Should I reply? The arrogance of his messages, the suggestion that we both wanted her, maybe, or that he had the upper hand. My blood boiled. My thumb hovered over the call button. Finally, I tapped. It rang twice, then an answer. "Michael," he said, voice smooth, a touch smug. "I wondered if you'd call." I held the phone tight. "What do you want?" A pause. "She came to me," he said quietly. "Or have you convinced yourself otherwise?" My jaw locked. "I didn't call to debate. Just tell me where you are." He laughed, a low, irritating sound. "Are you going to fight me? Is that your plan?" I said nothing. Another silence. "Look," he finally murmured. "I don't know what she told you, but it was real while it lasted. Maybe that's more than you gave her." A dull roar filled my ears. I pressed the phone tighter, my voice dropping. "Stay away from us." He chuckled again. "She's free to make her own decisions, and so are you." "I'm not asking permission." I clicked end so hard I nearly cracked my screen. My heart thudded. The nerve of him. That was the moment I realized I couldn't do this alone, quietly. The pain was a beast in my chest, and I needed a witness. A jury. The Brotherhood. A mad idea sparked. Summon them. All the men who'd touched my marriage with their dirty hands. Because Chris wasn't the only one. She'd lied to me more times than I could count, about her friends, work trips, the men she met just for coffee. Maybe not all were physical, but there were enough illusions, enough small betrayals, that I needed to see them, to force them to witness my rage and heartbreak. And in turn, I would show them who I was. No saint, no innocent. I had my own letters to other women, my own half-truths. But I needed them to see the consequences. I wanted them to look at me, to understand the depth of this destruction. Getting them together was strangely easy. A few calls, a few carefully aimed messages. Some were local. Some I had to coax with guilt or vague threats. They trickled in over the next few days, one by one, stepping into my living room like men called to a funeral. I guess that's what it felt like. The funeral of my marriage. If they expected a fight, they didn't get one. Instead, they found me calm, quiet, a man who'd already lost too much to bother with fists. We sat in a circle of mismatched chairs. I'd rearranged the furniture so that our old coffee table was in the center, cluttered with bottles of beer and whiskey. I didn't offer them soda or water, just alcohol. Let them drown in it. 3 men. The first was Greg, who used to meet her for drinks after work. She always called him a friend. The second was Tony, with whom she supposedly went on business trips. And then Chris arrived, unannounced but expected. He looked annoyingly composed, wearing a crisp shirt, hairstyled just so. I felt a pang of hatred as he took a seat. None of them made eye contact with each other. Silence. I stared at them. They stared at the floor, or the walls, or anywhere but my face. Chris was the only one who met my gaze straight on. A flicker of defiance there, or maybe pity, which enraged me more. I cleared my throat. "Why are we here?" My voice was low, almost too soft. But they heard it. No one answered. Tony shifted in his chair. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. Chris just folded his arms. I picked up a stack of papers from the coffee table. They were printouts of emails, texts, photos, my so-called evidence. Among them were my own letters to strangers, to old female friends, to random women I'd sought out in moments of weakness. I wanted no illusions. We were all guilty in some way. I slid the top page free and began reading, voice shaking at first, then growing steadier. "Sarah, I miss the way you laugh, the way your hair smells after a shower. I dream of the night in that hotel room, your body so warm against mine. Tony flinched. He recognized his own words. A hush followed. I continued, flipping to another page. Greg's casual message about meeting in a bar downtown, describing how maybe we can get closer. Then Chris's text, direct and laced with suggestion. My voice never rose in volume. It stayed at that chilling monotone. My heart hammered with each word, each bit of filth that had slipped between my wife and these men behind my back. Finally, I reached my letters. The ones I'd sent to women I barely knew. In them, I was painfully honest about my dissatisfaction, my curiosity, my longing for attention. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. I read them anyway. I forced it out, letting these men witness my own betrayal. My cheeks burned with shame. You see, I said, dropping the stack onto the table, I'm no saint. Greg stared at the floor. Tony's face was pale, guilty, maybe. Chris just watched me, a hint of that same smugness I'd heard on the phone. I fought the urge to leap across the table and smash that expression off his face. The whiskey bottle gleamed. I took a swig, felt the burn down my throat, and put it down with a dull thud. We're here, I muttered, because this isn't just about her. It's about us, all of us, and what we tried to steal or break. Tony wiped his forehead. Look, it wasn't supposed to go that far. Gray echoed him, voice trembling. She said you weren't. You didn't care about her anymore. My mouth twisted. And you believed her. He nodded silently, tears forming in his eyes. Maybe he was sincere, maybe not. Chris leaned forward. All this reading, he said quietly. All this guilt. But what do you want, Michael? Do you want an apology? Revenge? Yes, I replied, feeling the scorching fire in my chest. I want to bury it. All of it. Bury it how? Chris pressed. I stood, my legs unsteady. That's what tonight is, I said. A funeral. For every lie, for every promise you. And I broke. For the illusions I had that my wife was faithful, and that I was a decent man. I raised my glass. Drink, if you want. We're here to witness the death of something. They drank. Awkward sips. Tense, uneven gulps. The silence weighed heavy. I said nothing more, and they didn't dare speak. Finally, around midnight, Greg mumbled an apology, got up, and left. Tony followed, quietly, half in tears. Only Chris lingered, crossing one leg over the other, swirling the whiskey in his glass. You're going to hate me forever, he said, voice calm. I nodded. And you'll live with that. He stood, finishing his drink. She told me you were drifting away. That she felt invisible. I just offered her something. My stomach clenched. Get out. He exhaled, set the glass down, and left without another word. The echo of the door closing behind him felt final, yet it wasn't. Because she was still out there. Because in my own twisted way, I still needed to hear her side, even if I refused to forgive it. For a week, I kept silent. Sarah sent texts, left voicemails, each one more desperate. I didn't answer. She asked for a meeting. I ignored it. Part of me wanted to track her down, to see if she'd gone crawling back to Chris, or if she was somewhere alone, drowning in regret. But the rage still simmered under my skin. Then I started writing again. This time, not letters to other women, but to her. Nothing I intended to send. Just confessions, raw, unfiltered. Page after page of how I felt betrayed. How I recognized my own guilt. How a piece of me still loved her. Each paragraph stung. Sometimes I'd tear them up and toss them into the trash. Sometimes I'd read them back, feeling my throat tighten. On the 7th day, she showed up at the door. I'd just finished a shift of freelance work and was about to crack a beer when I heard her voice outside. Michael. Through the window, I saw her. She looked disheveled, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. For a moment, my chest constricted. This was the woman I'd married almost 20 years ago. The woman who used to laugh at my jokes, who'd shared 1,000 memories of cheap dinners and small triumphs and road trips across the Midwest. She was older now, lines of worry on her face, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Yet still, my heart twisted painfully. I walked to the door, opened it a crack. "What?" Her lips trembled. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "Talk about what?" She swallowed hard. "Us." I stared at her a long moment, taking in the slump of her shoulders, the faint sheen of tears in her eyes. Then I stepped back, let her enter. She stood in the hallway, wringing her hands. My stomach churned. The air felt claustrophobic. She spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." "For which part?" I asked, bitterness creeping in. She flinched. "All of it. Hiding things from you, letting Chris back into my life, the lies. I didn't know how to stop." I waited. Silence. She took a shaky breath. "Michael, I felt like you were so distant. I tried to reach you, but you were always locked in your own world. I needed to feel wanted." Something snapped in me. "So you slept with him?" I said, voice trembling. "That's your solution?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. "No, I didn't mean to go that far. It started with messages, old memories from college. Then one night, we were talking, and he—" "Stop." My tone was low. "I can imagine the rest." She closed her eyes. "I'm not trying to hurt you any more than I already have. I'm trying to explain." Rage flickered inside me, but so did regret and longing. The contradiction tore me apart. "I read your messages," I muttered. "Saw the pictures." Her sob escaped, raw and ugly. "I know." I breathed through clenched teeth. I also read my own messages, the ones I sent to other women. I told myself it was harmless. But maybe if I'd been there for you, you wouldn't have gone looking elsewhere. She shook her head vigorously. "Don't do that. Don't blame yourself entirely. I made my own choices." We stood in silence. I wanted to say 1,000 things, to lash out, to confess, to kneel. Instead, I stared at the floor. My chest felt ready to implode. Finally, she said, "I'm leaving town for a while, going to stay with my brother. I just wanted you to know that, and to say I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me someday." My jaw tightened. "I'm not sure if I can." She looked away. "I understand." I nodded stiffly, stepping aside so she could pass. She paused at the door. "Michael?" I braced myself. Her voice shook. "I still love you." I let out a dry laugh that bordered on a sob. "That's the problem." Without another word, she left. The door closed, and I sank to my knees, fists on the floor, silent tears burning my eyes. The only sound in the house was my own ragged breathing. The weeks that followed were surreal. Like a man in a dream, I performed daily routines, grocery shopping, paying bills, replying to clients. My mind was on autopilot. Nights were worse. I'd stare at the bedroom ceiling, remembering the curve of her back, the warmth of her breath on my neck. My fists would clench, and I'd want to scream, but nothing came out. I avoided the phone. I avoided people. The only conversation I really engaged in was with my parents, who sensed something was off but didn't press. I tried to sound normal, but the hollowness in my voice must have been obvious. They'd ask if Sarah and I were coming for Thanksgiving. I'd mumble an excuse, claiming we were busy. Eventually, I found a measure of resolution in the chaos. I typed a final letter. One for her, though I never planned to mail it. I wrote it for myself. "Sarah, you broke us. I broke us. We were both searching outside these walls for something we didn't have the courage to face within them. You found Chris. I found empty words with women I barely knew. Maybe we both wanted to be caught, to start over. Or maybe we wanted to destroy what we had out of boredom or resentment. Either way, this is the end of us. And yet, somehow, the end doesn't kill the love I still feel. which is the cruelest twist of all. That love is a curse. I typed it, printed it, read it again and again, then burned it in the sink. Watching the ashes swirl, I realized no single letter or dramatic gesture would erase the heartbreak. But it was a start, a letting go. Word travels in strange ways. Chris must have heard about Sarah's leaving, or maybe he tried to reach her and got nowhere. One night, as I sat nursing a beer, I heard a knock. Slow, deliberate. I opened the door to see him standing there, uninvited. Same cool stance, shoulders back, a hint of regret in his eyes. I stepped aside, letting him in. He said nothing at first, scanning the living room, the same place where I'd held that bizarre tribunal. I sat down on the couch, gestured for him to take a chair. He did. "Why are you here?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "I wanted to see if you'd heard from her. I tried calling. No answer. She's with her brother. That's all I know." A pause. "And you? What about me?" He glanced around. "Are you okay?" I let out a harsh laugh. "That's rich coming from you." He pursed his lips, nodding. "Yeah, fair." I studied him. This man who'd once been just a name in a college anecdote. Now he was the embodiment of my darkest betrayal. And yet, I no longer felt the urge to punch him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that hurting him wouldn't change anything. "What do you want, Chris?" I asked, more weary than angry. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I thought maybe we could talk. Clear the air." "I don't know. I'm just tired of running." I shook my head. "Nothing to clear. It happened." He pressed his eyes shut. "I never intended to destroy your marriage. Spare me. You knew what you were doing." He nodded, swallowing. "Yeah, I did." Silence. Neither of us knew what to say. My chest felt tight again, but not with rage. More like a deep sorrow that had congealed over time. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Chris said. "Going back to Seattle." I stared at him. "Fine." He sighed, rising from the chair. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I wish things had gone differently." I said nothing. He walked toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob. Then he opened it and left. No dramatic gestures, no final blow. Just emptiness in his wake. Time passed in uneven drips. I stumbled through the days, half lost. Work got busier, ironically enough, giving me an excuse to bury myself in deadlines. I learned how to be alone again, cooking simple meals for one, watching the nightly news in a near-silent house. The ache in my chest never fully disappeared, but it softened, or maybe I just got used to it. One crisp evening, I heard a knock at the door, a hesitant, soft tapping. My heart lurched. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Sure enough, Sarah stood there, eyes swollen as if she'd been crying for days. She wore a long coat, collar turned up against the chilly breeze. I didn't speak, just raised my eyebrows in question. She searched my face. Her lips trembled. "Michael, can I come in?" 1,000 emotions warred inside me. I hesitated, then nodded once. She stepped in, bringing a swirl of cold air with her. We ended up in the living room, just a few feet from that coffee table littered with old receipts and random clutter. A pointed reminder of our life together, now in disarray. She took a shaky breath. "I've been staying with my brother, like I said." "But She stopped, voice choking. I crossed my arms. "Spit it out." She swallowed. "I want to talk. Really talk. I know maybe it's too late, but I need to try." Her eyes were glossy, desperate. Part of me wanted to throw her out again, to tell her to vanish and let me nurse my wounds in peace. Another part, a part that still remembered how we used to laugh over silly jokes, how we decorated the Christmas tree each year, how we found ways to support each other. That part cracked open. I nodded. "All right. Talk." She perched on the edge of the couch. After everything that happened, the pictures, the texts, the men, I see how far I strayed. I don't even recognize that version of me. I was lonely, but that doesn't excuse anything. I wanted to feel alive again, to remember being wanted, being young. Chris showed up, and it was like stepping into a memory where life was simpler. But it was all an illusion. I sat down in the armchair across from her. My voice was taut. Illusion or not, you slept with him. Multiple times, from what I can tell. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. Yes, I let that word hang, heavy. She wiped her cheeks, continuing. I tried to justify it, telling myself you'd moved on too, writing to those women. But it's not the same. Even if your messages were inappropriate, you didn't cross that final line. I did. And I'm so sorry. My throat constricted. I can't just forget it. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if there's any chance at all, that we could rebuild. I inhaled sharply, the pain flaring. Why now? She shrugged helplessly. Because every time I close my eyes, all I see is what I ruined. You. Us. I realized how much I still love you, and I hate myself for hurting you this way. Her words battered at my walls. I'd envisioned a moment like this, but I always assumed my rage would triumph. Yet hearing her voice so broken, I wavered. My silence stretched. Finally, I said, Sarah, you killed something. We both did. It's not just going to come back. She nodded. I know, but I'd rather try than live with this regret forever. The house seemed to hold its breath. Cars passed outside, headlights flashing across the window. We stared at each other across the chasm of our mistakes. My eyes burned. I thought of the photos, the tribunal, the half-empty bottles of whiskey, the nights I'd spent alone seething in the dark. I also thought of the small, tender memories, the breakfasts she made, the times she comforted me when I was sick, the laughter we shared on lazy Sunday mornings. What did I want? Forgiveness felt impossible. Vengeance had hollowed me out. All that remained was a numb ache, and beneath that ache, an echo of love I couldn't fully extinguish. I forced myself to speak. I can't guarantee anything. She let out a shaky breath. I understand. I'm angry. My voice trembled. I've never felt a betrayal like this. She nodded. I know. I swallowed. But I still, damn it, I still care. Even now. Her eyes shone with gratitude and sorrow. That's enough. For now. Silence again, thick and uncertain. I rose from the chair. I need space. Of course. I walked her to the door. She lingered on the threshold, as if wanting to say more. But she found no words. She left quietly, and I closed the door behind her. My heart pounded. I realized that I wasn't quite as empty as I'd thought. A sliver of something remained, some seed that might, God help me, grow back into a flicker of hope. But I wasn't ready to let it bloom yet. I was too raw. Life went on. We stayed apart for another stretch, exchanging occasional calls. She asked if she could drop by, if we could see a counselor. I hesitated, stalling. Meanwhile, I tried to get a handle on my own guilt. I needed to figure out if I really wanted to salvage our marriage, or if I just wanted to punish her. Weeks blurred into months. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a dull acceptance. Then, out of nowhere, an email arrived, from Chris. The subject line read, "No hard feelings." An attempt at closure. I stared at it for a long minute, heart pounding. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Michael, I'm writing to say I'm leaving the country for a bit, traveling for work. I wanted to apologize one last time. I know that doesn't fix anything. I never expected the affair to become so damaging. I never wanted to humiliate you, though I admit my pride might have spurred me to provoke you. If Sarah ever needs me, she knows where to find me. But I suspect she's already made her choice. I hope you two find peace, together or separately. Chris, my hand tightened around the mouse. 1,000 rebuttals swarmed my mind, from go to hell to thanks for nothing. But I didn't reply. I simply deleted the email, emptied the trash, and felt a strange, fractured calm. Chris was gone, maybe for good. The rest was up to Sarah and me. Eventually, Sarah returned to town. She asked if we could meet for coffee in a neutral place, a quiet cafe near the library. I agreed. We found a corner booth, sat across from each other. The smell of coffee beans enveloped us in a comforting haze. She looked tired but more composed than before. We spoke softly, voices subdued. She told me about her time away, how she broke down in front of her brother, how she realized she was chasing old fantasies because she felt our marriage had lost the spark. I admitted I'd been distant, wrapped up in my own disillusionment, writing half-flirtatious letters to strangers. We were both at fault in different ways, though her fault stung more deeply because it was physical, real. We spent over an hour just talking, sipping coffee that went cold. By the end, my nerves felt raw, but I sensed a small weight lift from my chest. She reached across the table, fingertips grazing mine. I didn't pull away, but I didn't reciprocate either. "I want to come home," she said softly. The words twisted my insides. "I'm not sure I can handle that yet," I replied. She nodded, tears threatening. "I understand. Whenever you're ready." We parted with a tentative hug. It felt foreign, like embracing a stranger who wore my wife's perfume. I drove home feeling both shattered and weirdly hopeful. The future was murky, but at least we were talking. A few nights later, I sat alone again, in that same armchair, the same half-finished whiskey by my side. The house felt too quiet. My phone vibrated, a text from her. "I miss you. Call if you want to talk." I read it twice, my heart heavy. Then I set the phone aside. Instead of calling, I stood and walked into our bedroom. The bed was neatly made, smelling faintly of detergent. I sank onto it, letting out a long exhale. Images flashed in my mind. Me discovering those photos. The humiliation, the rage, the heartbreak. Then, inevitably, the love I once felt for her. That connection wasn't gone, only buried. My breathing trembled. I realized I'd have to make a choice. Either let her try to fix this with me, or slam the door forever. Indecision gnawed at me. I thought of my father's old advice. If you can't stand the sight of her after a betrayal, then walk away. But if losing her hurts more than the betrayal, maybe it's worth trying to mend. It was too simple, but the words lodged in my mind. Finally, as midnight approached, I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring, voice hushed with hope. "Michael." Silence on my end. A pregnant pause. Then I said, "Can you come by tomorrow? Maybe we can talk more. Figure something out." A small audible gasp. "Yes. I'll be there." I hung up, my heart pounding. That night I barely slept, consumed by a swirl of memories. Good times, bad times, the new uncertain times. The next afternoon, she arrived. I paced the living room, feeling dizzy with nerves. She wore a simple cardigan and jeans, hair brushed, eyes red but determined. Without preamble, I motioned for her to sit on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to sit beside her, so I chose the armchair again, a safe distance. I took a breath. "I don't know if I can ever trust you like before." Her eyes brimmed. "Unwilling to work every day to earn it back." I nodded, my emotions swirling. "Part of me wants to slam that door on you and never look back. Another part." I trailed off, struggling to form words. She finished for me softly. "Another part still loves me." I closed my eyes. "Yes." We sat in tortured silence. Then she spoke, voice steady but gentle. "I will do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, moving out of state, starting fresh. Anything." My jaw tensed. What if it doesn't work? What if every time I look at you, I see him? She swallowed. "That's a chance we have to take if we want to move forward." My shoulders slumped. "I can't promise I'll forgive you." She nodded. "I'm not asking for an immediate pardon. Just the possibility." Suddenly, all the tension I'd hoarded burst forth in a ragged exhale. I buried my face in my hands, choking out, "Damn it, Sarah. Why? Why did it have to be him?" She slid off the couch onto her knees, a desperate gesture, and reached for my hands. She didn't dare grip them, just let her fingers hover. Tears streaked down her face. Because I was a coward, I ran to something familiar instead of fixing what was broken here. I let her touch my hands. Her palms were warm and shaky. My throat felt thick. I recalled the moment I discovered the photos, that gut-wrenching betrayal. The rage was still there, but overshadowed now by sorrow and a sliver of reluctant hope. She whispered, "I can't change the past." I nodded slowly. "I know." A clock ticked on the wall, the only sound in that loaded pause. Then I stood, lifting her to her feet. My voice was low. "We'll try, but if I feel this is too much, if I can't deal with it, then it's over. No second chances beyond this." She bit her lip, nodding. "Understood." I glanced away, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Stay with me tonight?" I asked, almost ashamed of how vulnerable the question sounded. She closed her eyes, relief washing over her features. "Yes. If you want me." I said nothing, just guided her toward the bedroom. There, in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, we faced the physical distance that lingered between us. She tried to touch me, and I froze, images of her and Chris searing my mind. I stepped back, tears of frustration burning my eyes. She whispered, "I'm sorry," over and over, voice cracking. We ended up lying side by side, fully clothed, not touching, sharing a single blanket. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us both. Morning light slipped through the curtains, landing across our faces. She was still there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I felt the tension in the air. Neither of us spoke. My heart pounded with the weight of everything that lay ahead. Therapy, constant doubts, painful memories. But there was also a quiet voice inside me that said, "You can love her, even after all this. Do you want to?" She turned her head slightly. "Good morning." I stared at her for a moment. Then I pushed myself up, ignoring the stiffness in my back. She followed me into the kitchen. We moved tentatively, like two people in a fragile dance. I poured us coffee, no sugar, just milk. She drank it quietly, her gaze flicking around the room as though seeing it for the first time in years. There were no grand declarations that morning, no illusions that everything was fixed, just an unspoken agreement that we would attempt to navigate this impossible road. She would try to prove her remorse, and I would try to see past my pain. The outcome was still uncertain. That evening, a few hours before sunset, something compelled me to open the folder on my laptop. Tax Documents 2022. I hadn't touched it since the night I discovered the photos. With trembling fingers, I clicked it, half expecting the images to assault me again. But I deleted them. Instead, I found an empty directory. I stared at the blank screen, remembering the numb terror that had seized me. Sarah came up behind me, footsteps careful. "You okay?" I closed the folder. "Just checking." She placed a tentative hand on my shoulder. For a second, I tensed. Then I covered her hand with mine. A small gesture, but one that carried a lot of weight. She squeezed gently. I cleared my throat. "I want to bury this. I don't want to be haunted by it forever." She nodded. "Me too." With her hand still on my shoulder, I moved the folder to the trash and clicked empty. A confirmation prompt appeared, and I selected yes. The icon vanished. A symbolic gesture, maybe pointless, but it felt like a step, however small, toward letting go. We stood there in silence, the screen's glow reflecting off our faces. Then the doorbell rang, startling us both. I glanced at Sarah, then headed to answer. Through the peephole, I saw no one. Cautiously, I opened the door. The porch was empty, but a package rested on the welcome mat, no return address. My stomach tightened. I picked it up. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper. Sarah hovered behind me, anxiety in her eyes. Carefully, I tore the wrapping. Inside was a stack of old photos from our early days. Me and Sarah in college, smiling wide, arms around each other at some campus event. Tucked among them was a note in a handwriting I recognized as her mother's. From years ago, never forget why you chose each other. My throat constricted. Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears. Where did you get these? She whispered. I don't know, I said, scanning the street for any sign of who might have dropped them off. No clue. Maybe your father found them. She shook her head, trembling. He wouldn't do this anonymously, but I'm glad they're here. We stood on the doorstep, flipping through the photos. In each one, we looked so young, so certain of our future. Before cynicism, before broken promises. Seeing those faces, all hopeful and radiant, was like a punch to the gut, reminding us of the love we once shared. Sarah pressed a photo to her chest. I never stopped loving you. I just got lost. I nodded, tears burning the corners of my eyes. We stepped inside, shutting the door on the cold evening breeze. Over the next few days, we placed those old photos around the house, bit by bit, a small step in rewriting the memories. Some might call it foolish or naive. But it was our way of saying we weren't done fighting for this marriage. Even if the road was going to be hard, we could at least remember the foundation. We began therapy. We stumbled through raw confessions, tears, anger, abrupt walkouts. Some sessions ended with me cursing under my breath, or Sarah sobbing uncontrollably in the car. But we kept going. Week after week, I told her how the images of Chris haunted me, how I felt worthless, betrayed, emasculated. She admitted she'd felt lonely for years, uncertain if I truly cared or if I was just going through the motions. We peeled back layers of resentment, guilt, regret. Slowly, something like hope flickered. I stopped the late-night letters to strangers. She cut off all contact with Chris. We started having real conversations, though the shadow of her affair never fully disappeared. She even apologized to my parents, who were hurt to see our marriage unravel. Day by day, we tried to mend the frayed edges, but it wasn't easy. Some nights, the memory of that rug, those photos, would slam into me like a train. I'd sit up in bed, sweating, and watch her sleeping form, torn between anger and love. It would be so much simpler to banish her, but I couldn't. I realized that to deny how deeply I felt for her was to deny part of myself. We inched forward, uncertain if we'd ever reclaim what we had. Our wedding rings felt heavier, more complicated. Sometimes I'd glance at the ring on my finger, thinking of how easily she'd undone that vow, or how easily I chipped away at it with my own flirtations, yet I couldn't bring myself to remove it. Neither could she. One evening, months after the discovery, we found ourselves in the living room after a particularly grueling therapy session. She stood by the window, arms folded around herself. I approached, heart pounding with unresolved tension. Carefully, I wrapped my arms around her from behind. She stiffened, then relaxed into my embrace. We stayed there, watching the streetlights flicker on. She turned in my arms and reached up to brush tears from my cheek. I hadn't realized I was crying. Her voice trembled. Thank you for not giving up on me. I pressed my forehead against hers. Thank you for not giving up on us. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Our lips met, softly at first, a tentative exploration after so much pain. Then something deeper ignited, a memory of passion we'd once shared. We held each other, hearts pounding, tears mingling with unexpected relief. Was it forgiveness? Not entirely. But it was a start of something new, if we dared let it blossom. Time can be cruel, but it can also heal. Months turned into a year. We learned to live with the knowledge that what happened could never be erased. Some days were good. We shared jokes, made dinner together, even managed a small vacation. Other days, a random memory of Chris or my own humiliations would slam me like a sledgehammer, and I'd spend hours in brooding silence. She learned to give me space, to let me process. I learned to voice my fears without burying them in resentment. In the end, there was no neat bow, no perfect resolution. Just the steady, day-by-day work of rebuilding. We had changed irrevocably, but we were alive, together. That had to be enough. And so it came to pass that one evening, close to the anniversary of our near separation, she stood in the doorway, much like the night she first walked out. This time, her trembling lips asked, "Can we talk?" In a tone laden with cautious hope rather than despair. I studied her for a moment. She was the same woman who had broken my heart, the same woman who had awakened some of my own darkest impulses. She was also the woman I had spent half my life loving. My chest felt tight, but not with anger. More like acceptance. I stepped back, letting her in. "Sure," I said quietly. "I'm listening." She entered, and for the first time in a long while, I noticed her shoulders weren't bowed in shame. Maybe we were learning how to carry this together. I closed the door behind her, thinking of how, once upon a time, I shut this same door in her face. But now, it was different. Maybe I'd found a piece of myself again, battered but intact. She looked around, eyes lingering on the photos we'd placed around the house, our younger selves smiling back. Tears glistened in her eyes. She turned to face me. "I love you," she said, as if declaring it for the first time. A tremor ran through me. Love, even after all. Maybe that was the point. I reached for her hand, felt her warmth, and gave a small, weary smile. "I know," I whispered, because yes, it was a mistake. A nice, neat, catastrophic mistake that nearly destroyed us. But in the slow burn of pain and regret, we found a reason to stay, to hold on, to see if love could overcome betrayal. Maybe tomorrow, we'd fail again, or maybe we'd make it. Either way, this time, we'd face it side by side. And so I let her speak, her eyes brimming with tears, and I listened. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just seeing a traitor. I was seeing the woman I married, flawed but real, ready to fight for whatever future we had left. I stood there, silent, and realized I was ready to live again. Ready to breathe. Ready to feel something besides anger and grief. Ready, even, to forgive. One day, she gripped my hand a little tighter. "Thank you," she whispered. I closed my eyes. Slowly, I led her into the living room. No fanfare, no applause. Just the two of us. And for the first time since it all began, I felt my heartbeat steady, felt my soul settle. I was alive. I was still here. And that was enough.